I'm going to be talking more from the perspective of philosophy, trying to, in a way, offer some ideas about why unification could be interesting, not just for physics, but also for philosophy, basically in general, and which might, in a way, talk in favor of unification regardless of any problems with physics or whatever solutions are being offered and so on. Okay? It's more about the idea of unification as a good method, in a way. And I could, in a way, say that that philosophy is, in a way, in a similar state of, as I understand, disunification, which maybe strangely enough coincides perhaps with the growing disunification in physics. Throughout the 20th century, philosophy has gone through a number of revolutions regarding what philosophy is all about. And people have been, in a way, in a certain sense, a little bit fascistic about that. Either philosophy, the only thing it can do is to clarify language. So we have all philosophy of language. Or the only thing we can do is to illustrate some concept of knowledge, perhaps. Everything becomes epistemology. And then other people say that metaphysics is the only way to do things and so on. Instead of looking at the different disciplines as sharing the burden of understanding the total picture, in a way. Okay. So there's a point of also advocating unification within philosophy. But the focus here is perhaps on how metaphysics perhaps and physics could, in a way, combine. And on the surface of it, metaphysics seems to be engaged in a very similar kind of project. It's often described as seeking the answer in a very abstract and general way about what there is, what it's like. Sometimes those are distinguished into ontology answering the first, metaphysics the second, although I find it difficult to see how you could really answer one without answering the other at the same time. Right? So I tend to say I'm doing metaphysics, encapsulating both ontology and metaphysics. So there are questions about existence, objects and their properties in a very general sense, space and time, causation, which is my kind of field, necessity and possibility. And if it hadn't been for the possibility there at the end, I think we'd be, in a better position because possibility encounters all kinds of, or generates all kinds of questions about, well, if things could be differently than how they are actually, how far can we push that's different? So if we start with the assumption that metaphysics and science are in a way continuous in the sense that they're trying to answer the same question, both are trying to figure out what the world is really like, as opposed to what it appears to be like, that invites the metaphysical speculation or hypothesis about underlying structures and so on. Then the question, what is this reality that we're talking about that we initially seem to be investigating? Is that equivalent to the world or the universe as we know it, in a way? Is that, in a way, the end point of understanding the universe? Well, in some circles, in philosophy at least, the assumption is that's not the end of reality. Is much bigger, in a way. Being is wider than just the universe as we know it. And so for them, whatever physics finds out about this particular world is just to find out about one among many possible worlds. And therefore the theories and findings of the empirical sciences just aren't really interesting or relevant because you're only telling us one side of the story. On the other hand, you can wonder, well, what constraints do we have then for any thoughts about this larger reality? And in the end, it becomes just conceivability. Everything that is conceivable is then actual component of what we could call the ultimate reality. And in philosophy, there's no check about which of these many conceivabilities are in a way actually real. And you can wonder, as I wonder, whether that really is an exploration of reality or just an exploration of the limits of thought. And if that's the case, it's only an exploration of the limits of thought, we've not really been doing metaphysics. Okay? One can wonder in physics, what are the limits imposed there? Well, the idea is that there's this world, and whatever we find about this world is the limitation on what's possible, necessary, and so on. We might want to find out certain laws of nature about how the world necessarily works. Doesn't exclude that things could have turned out slightly different from what they actually turn out to be, but it's still an aspect of this world. But I'm worrying also that perhaps in physics you're seeing the idea that the mathematics is what defines reality, and the mathematics is richer than what the actual reality is like. And that invites speculation about, in a way, a broader, general, more mathematical ultimate reality, of which the actual mathematics of the present universe is just only one instance. Yeah. Maybe there's, in a way, similar things going on there as it is within philosophy. And this, in a way, this separation of metaphysics and science, I see frequently in the media, and this is just one of the very latest I've seen. Science is a method used to discover facts about the material world. Metaphysics, however, deals with the whole of reality, or put in a philosophical language, being as such. Where science discloses the properties of the physical world, metaphysics ventures beyond the physical and explores the fundamental nature of all that is. So hinting at the idea that all that is not just the things that actually exist, but being is somehow wider, right? Although perhaps we can, well, I'm misunderstanding this person, and maybe it's just meaning that that metaphysics is operating on a higher level of generality, and that it's not just physics, but also chemistry, biology, the humanities, and so on that become interesting, the mind, yeah? And that's a completely different scenario, because the mind can be in this world as well, right? And doesn't have to cover all possible worlds in a way. So here's another conception of how metaphysics aligns with physics and still is different. The different particular empirical sciences are looking in a way at different segments of the larger picture. Physics typically looking at the smallest entities, particles, forces that operate between them, space-time structures and so on. Chemistry then, looking at larger compounds, looking at the bonds between them and the reactions they hold. We can move into biology, looking at different stuffs that are more systematic in character, are able to send over genetic material and so on, yeah? And there's nobody in these disciplines that in a way takes then a step back and asks, are there something that cuts across all the different disciplines? Some kind of conceptual structure that they all in a way share in a more generalized way. For instance, do they all assume some category of persistent entities that we call substances, or some even more abstract stuff? Are they all assuming properties that are attached to these substances, relations between them? They assume there's something called causation, and we'd like causation to operate between the particles, between the chemical compounds, between biological entities. So the role of metaphysics becomes to describe those very general, in a way, or offer a general model of how that can be done. I've offered, for instance, that causation should be understood in terms of reciprocal action or interaction. That seems to be something that cuts across all the different disciplines. And in this sense, yes, we're doing the same thing, but slightly different way. And then metaphysics, in a way, becomes the joining point. And in fact, metaphysicians have seen themselves, or seen metaphysics as, in a way, the spider in the web of science, linking the different sciences together. This is from Jonathan Lowe, saying that metaphysics is an ineliminable and conceptually necessary as the intellectual backdrop for every other discipline, because the world or reality as a whole is unitary and necessarily self-consistent. And note, there are two claims here, one about metaphysics, the other about the world. The claim about metaphysics shouldn't be taken as a claim about the discipline of metaphysics. Metaphysicians that are part of the discipline don't perhaps engage in that kind of thing. Rather that wherever anyone speculates about connections between sciences, tries to link certain things up, makes assumptions on this more general level, they're doing metaphysics. So metaphysics is a shared enterprise among all of us, right? Some just specialize, yeah. So that's in a way the way we could say that the role of metaphysics is to, in the end, be unificatory, you could say, yeah? Although that's not the way it is pursued in actual reality, yeah.